There we go. There's the theme tune for the Finnish football show, which can only mean we're back on air. And this week, I remembered to press record, so that should make my job of editing this thing a lot easier afterwards. Thanks for joining me. I'm Mark Wiltshire from Explore Finland, along with my co-host here is Mark from FC Suomi. Hi, Mark.
Hello.
And down the bottom this week is Rich from Escape to Suomi.
Hello.
And there's a wonderful delay between the audio and the video from Rich, so I actually heard him say it before his lips moved.
Hello.
It's better. Thanks for coming to episode 4 of the Finnish football show. We've got some people watching live, which is fantastic. Bearing in mind that I only actually got round to scheduling this morning, so you've all done us proud. I can see a few people in there. Those of you that are watching live, why not just use the message bar on the right hand side and let us know where you're watching. I know that we've got Huck there who's over in the States, but where is everyone else? Just put a message there. You don't have to ask questions or anything else, but let us know where you're watching from. Episode 4 this week is going to be about the Liga Cup games, the group games, and heading up towards the final, and also Finnish players that have been in European action recently, or action overseas anyway. As with last time, we're going to try this format of us talking a lot and you lot listening, and then having a couple of specific question and answer sessions. So if you've got any questions, there's a couple of ways to get them to us. You can use the hashtag FFS4 on Twitter, and Rich is quite good at keeping an eye on the old Twitter feed, so we'll come to those after the first section. Or you can also type a question in the message bar at the side there. And if you type / and Q and then type your question, it will pop up on the left side of the screen, and we'll have all the questions separated. And if you've just got smart aleck comments that you want to make, then by all means make those in the message bar at the right hand side. So remember, hang around to the end of the show where we'll have a little bit of off the record chat. It doesn't often get blue, but it's nice to have a little relaxed few minutes of chat with whoever's still hanging around.
Unless we're quoting Juha Mallinen, in which case it gets incredibly blue.
that I've got that written down actually.
Yeah, and the warning that I think is going to become a regular thing now is to Rich to try and not drop the F-bomb too many times, because that does slow down the editing as well. But normally he says he's only quoting other people.
Or me.
Yeah, or yourself. So
can I start quoting Rich?
Yeah.
To drop the F-bomb.
Double quote marks around it. Yeah. Hey Rich, you've been to Podcast Boot Camp.
Yes, producer Ben from Football Weekly. He sat us all down in Guardian HQ on a Sunday morning with the organic coffee and hemp biscuits and all that. And he sat down it was a good 3.5 hours talking about podcasting, the medium. And you forget, sort of outside of our sphere, how much other podcasts there are. There was a podcast about swinging, in the biblical sense. And it was, but then he said, "Oh, put your hands up if you've listened to Serial, the one about the cold case murderer." And, 3/4 of the room put their hand up, and I was sort of looking around going, "What Serial?" I had no idea. So obviously I've recorded it and shared it amongst the guys, and, hopefully some of producer Ben's magic will rub off on here, and it may not be up to the standard of AC Jimbo and all that, but I don't think I'm as miserable as Glenn Benning. So.
No, I have listened to it, and I thought it was interesting. It was good, and thanks for recording it. You're not planning to put in a transfer request to move over to the Swingers podcast, are you?
Well, no. I mean, I've got an Aston Martin keyring on my Ford Focus key, so that might give it away a little bit. when we go next door. But I did make that joke when we met the neighbours, and it didn't go down very well.
No, okay.
Semi-joke.
Oh, that's good. Well, I that's a bad choice of words. I think that having listened to it, I've got no intention of that changing us whatsoever, and I think we'll still be as shambolic as ever.
It works.
I like it.
Before we crack on with the news section, I just wanted to give a little shout out to someone who made me a very happy old man the other day. I was at a work event, and it was like a sort of careers fair, trade show kind of thing. And I walked around with my business card in hand, trying to, pimp my company services. And I got talking to a guy called Mika, and introduced myself. And he said, "Oh, I've heard of you." He said, "I listened to the Finnish football show." And I was like, "Yay! We got a fan." So, Mika, I know you're not watching live, but you'll hopefully be listening to this on the podcast. And thanks for letting me know that you're watching, and thanks to everybody that's watching. So before we've got a few people.
Hang on. If you're going to do shout outs, can I get the band in now? Because
Sure.
Otherwise I've forgotten for the first, like every week for the last 3 weeks, I've forgotten to thank Lemmen Pysyt, who are a band based in Tampere who have written the song Loppuun asti that we use for the intro to the show. And they're on hiatus at the minute, but if you blast their Facebook page enough, they'll go back out on tour.
Oh, good stuff.
So,
we'll try and get them.
Thank you, Lemmen Pysyt.
Yeah, it's good. It's good stuff, and I'll make sure we'll put a link to that in the show notes so that people can find them. Spotify and iTunes and wherever else you can find their stuff. So where are you watching us from? We got someone in Study, which I know is what the locals call Helsinki. Who else have we got there? No one else. Well, come on, guys. Let us know where you're watching from.
I know Finnsvenskan, and I think he's the guy who does the Swedish. He's got a Swedish Twitter account that follows Finnish football. Yes. I like him. Good guy.
There's been a lot of new Twitter accounts that have become known to me in the last few weeks, all about Finnish football, and it amazes me. The French one and the Swedish one and so on and so on. So it's good stuff, and hopefully they find their way to find us as well. So how about if we head over to the news? Who wants to go first with the news this week?
I'll go. I've got I sort of picked out in a very similar cup vein. I've got the fourth round of the Suomen Cup was drawn on Monday, which is the Finnish Cup. It's basically run the same way as the FA Cup, with different levels of clubs coming at different times. This time saw the introduction of 6 of the Veikkausliiga clubs, along with those from Ykkönen and Kakkonen, and some actually really interesting draws. Even at this stage, it's funny that the way the Finnish Cup works is that the team who's ranked in the lower division plays at home. So it's given some interesting ties. We've got Tampere United, which is a blast from the past, playing TPS. This is the new Tampere United after they sort of re-merged with their own Phoenix club, which if anyone follows the whole Wimbledon saga, it's like that. Yeah. And we've got a Savo derby. We've got MP against Cups. Hercules, who are Daniel Amakatchi's team, they travel to FC Kisto. And funnily enough, someone who I know who's involved in Espa, in Espoo, he said that he's Irish, and when he moved to Finland, the first game he saw was a Champions League game between Haka and Liverpool. His team are now playing Haka in the next round of the Cup. So, it's an interesting one, and I hope, Colm, if you're listening, enjoy.
So when are those games played, Rich? Is that still part of the indoor sort of season?
It's it starts, games start to come outside. The first games kick off, I think it's early next week, and they go on basically whenever they can be fitted in by the two clubs, really. It's still quite a loose system where they don't play on a set weekend. It's as long as the games are played within a 4-week period. And then for the next round, which is the last 32, the final 6 Veikkausliiga teams, including the ones in Europe, they drop in, and it's just straight knockout from there.
Okay, good stuff. Do you want to go next, Mark? You appear to have silenced yourself. In which case, I will talk, and you can try and get yourself connected again, whatever's the problem there. I just wanted... I noticed the story a couple of weeks ago. Of course I noticed. It was about Kilmarnock in Scotland apparently making an approach to Simo Valakari at Asiko. And while I could see the appeal for them in trying to bring him across, I'm not so sure that I could see Kilmarnock being a step up from the Veikkausliiga and from Asiko. Derby County, maybe, who also got rid of their manager around the same time, you could perhaps sort of step back and say, okay, fair enough, you've got somewhere to move on to there. But fortunately for the Asiko fans, the club moved nice and quickly and got Simo tied down to a new 4-year contract. So everything's okay as far as we're concerned. And I guess if a club makes an approach, then maybe there's some kind of recompense.
It was
Mark, are you back with us?
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you again.
Hey, great.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So I was just talking about Simo Valakari not going to Kilmarnock. What was your news story from the last few weeks?
I was going to bring up Jukka Raitala, who's moved now to Sogndal in Tippeliiga and in Norway, as being the latest of a number of Finns to go out there. But in the last 30 minutes, the Paloliitto has tweeted. See, topical. It's going to work especially well on the podcast. The Paloliitto's tweeted just now that they're going to support Infantino in the FIFA presidential elections, which I have to say is a bit disappointing. I mean, probably it's not unexpected because the Paloliitto is like many other, I guess, of the associations in FIFA that's full of maybe a little bit of an old boys network, that they've gone for the guy who's like Platini light because they couldn't vote for Platini because of the scandal that he's ensconced in. So that's interesting because
who's better? I mean, I know it's kind of, there's not much of a choice there, but who would you prefer?
It's a terrible bunch, but who's the better option? Is it Faisal, the guy who's from the Saudi Arabian fella? Or no, Jordan.
There's Bahrain. There's the Sheikh Salman from Bahrain, who's got a lot of questionable kind of
human rights stuff.
Let's say dubious achievements behind him, allegedly.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think I don't necessarily think Alicante agrees with me, so we must be right. He doesn't think there are many better options either.
You've got that South African guy, Tokyo Sex Whale.
No, Tokyo. I think Tokyo Sex Whale dropped out. I mean,
has he dropped out?
They should give it to him just for the fun we can have over the next 20 years as he clings on to power.
Yeah, if not, he'd get my vote. No, but it's a bit like I do think there's still a terrible vibe and stink around FIFA. I mean, I know Infantino's probably all right. He's probably the best of a bad bunch, but still, I mean, it just seems to be like another. I don't think there's going to be any particular change.
Yeah, no, I think everyone probably agrees that bringing different people into the same organisation, working the same way it's not changing anything. Everything just stays the same, isn't it?
I think Huck agrees.
Yeah, it seems.
How could you vote against Tokyo Sex Whale? Even if he's not anymore on the ballot, we should somehow get him back on.
Okay, so let's move on to the next section. After this, we'll have a break for questions. So remember, get your questions up on the right hand side. Use the /Q before you type your question, and it'll pop up on the left hand side, and we'll answer those after the next section. And remember, if you think that one of the three of us on here is particularly informative, amusing, or handsome, then by all means use the little hands on the screen and give us some love. We need the love. Dear God, we need the love. So let's move on to the Finns. Finns in Europe, or Finns playing overseas at the moment. Finns in action abroad. The big one last week, and also continuing this week, was Tim Sparv playing for Midtjylland against Manchester United.
Yeah,
Mark,
I can say I can kick it off. Yeah, I mean, so it's not a vintage Man United side. It's got to be said. They had a lot of problems, and Midtjylland got lucky in that way that was it just before the kickoff, David De Gea got ruled out injured, so he couldn't start. So that was a massive boost. But I did say it's going to be an odd night of predictions for me, because in the last show I named Hifki as my dark horse for the Liga Cup, and they're bottom, they're bottom of Group B. But I did say, I think 2 shows ago, that if you're going to play Man United, this is the time to play them. And I thought Sparv was amazing. There was a minute in the 35th, I think it was about 35th minute, where he picked the ball off Mata on the edge of his own box, took a step or two forward, and then pinged a looped through ball over the Man United backline and sent his fellow attacker away on a 40-yard chase to be one-on-one with the keeper. I mean, the guy missed the chance, but you just sort of look at him and think, where did he come from? Because 2 years ago, even a year, even when he moved to Denmark, you thought, this is kind of it. This is going to sort of mellow out and have a mid-level kind of career. But it was the same when he played against Southampton earlier in the season. He was just huge in front of the back four. He blocked up the play. He was quick off his feet, surprisingly quick for a guy his size. And I thought his distribution was brilliant.
It's funny, sort of obviously watching it from London, Tim Sparv seems to be very much the focal point of Midtjylland as far as even the English TV channels are concerned. I watched Man United's Cup game the other night, and they had the picture to announce the fixture because they're showing the Midtjylland game, and it was Tim Sparv and Juan Mata, and it was just sort of surreal that even on Friday morning after the first match, Tim Sparv was in the background of the BBC Breakfast News while they were talking about Tesco now selling straight croissants. So it's and Tim found that quite funny. But the fact that he's gone to a club who very much are on the up, we don't really see them as a traditional thing. But the way they're being run, the same owners as Brentford, it's very strange. But it's almost like a football manager experiment. But
he's great. It's really strange. He's been in a way he's been kind of lucky because of sort of the habits of English football. Because if you looked at the pre-match stuff for Man United, everybody was saying, okay, like, which is the harder game for Man U, Midtjylland or Shrewsbury Town? Like, they were sort of putting it as a walk in the park for Man U, and they knocked out Southampton. Southampton were full strength under Koeman. It was a kind of a bit of a dog of a game, but they worked hard. They were very organised. They did what they do, and they knocked out Southampton. And still, they weren't taken particularly seriously. And then the second thing that he's got going for him is that he was rejected or kicked out of English football for not being good enough, and he's managed to come back and haunt two. First of all, the side that let him go, and second, the side he supported as a kid. So it's a great story, but I think more than the story, he was just really good. And it's kind of surprising how much he's grown as a player in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
I used to, for the last few years, I guess through the Ferguson era, I used to love watching Man U. And not a Man United fan, but the way they played football with the wingers and the exciting play. And I know I started to sound like my dad in the 80s when Liverpool were great. And I was a kid and I hated them because they won everything. And my dad was like, Liverpool are a great team to watch. But I just can't watch them anymore. And, United are playing badly. Arsenal play nice football, but I knew what was going to happen last night. I went to bed after the first goal and I said to myself, they're going to let another goal in just before the end. And then when I woke up this morning and found out that it was a penalty in the 83rd minute, it was like, oh, okay, I'm smart. So I can't get myself excited to watch them. And how was the game last week? Apart from Sparv's performance, was it a game worth watching? Is it worth me watching tomorrow?
I think the way Man United have played this year, it was probably one of the better games because they're generally terrible. They're not particularly exciting to watch. I think, Midtjylland sat back, counter-attacked quite a lot, gave the Sparv did Sparv was like Rich said, he was kind of pivotal in breaking up the play and then redistributing it forward. They used a lot of pace on the break. Man United, if they'd have had Rooney, for example, Rooney was out injured as well. If they'd have had Rooney fit, they'd have probably won it. And the truth is, I think the replay is tomorrow, isn't it? Oh. It's still 50-50. I'd still probably, my heart wants obviously Tim Sparv to go there and put another 30-yard screamer in at the Stretford end to send Midtjylland through, but I still probably think that Man U will have too much for them tomorrow.
Who's that? Is that self-love on the screen there, Mark? You're getting someone
hands-free, absolutely hands-free. It's not me. Got nothing.
Come on, guys. He's good, but he's not that good. Someone's button's got stuck. Surely.
I think there's a clear technical fault. Tim, wait a minute. It's Tim. It's Tim himself. Tim, give me a virtual hug.
I didn't realise he'd logged in. I didn't notice.
But I do actually. I mean, the thing is, Hux made a point on the chat about being the next Huuhkaja captain, the Finnish captain. And when Moisander was out in the later stages last year, Sparv got the captaincy for a couple of games, and it was at the same time when Finland's upturn in form kind of took hold. So I think I agree. I mean, that in terms of his performance, his control of the game, his understanding, his reading of the game, he should absolutely be captain. He's earned. This is kind of classic what we've talked about on various occasions. He's earned the right to be the captain because he looks like he's the best player. And honestly, from the game, it looked like he could walk into 15, 16 Premier League teams midfield. Do you know what I mean? If I start to think about the team, he wouldn't get in Arsenal's team. He probably wouldn't replace Schweinsteiger or Carrick at the moment. He wouldn't get in Man City's team. It's kind of crazy to talk like that, but he would get, like, he'd play Everton. He'd play at Everton. He'd play maybe he's not Spurs, but Watford, Palace, those kind of teams. Newcastle, God, he'd control a midfield in any of those teams.
So he's not doing himself any harm at the moment then by playing well in high-profile games against United. That's for sure.
Shop window.
Yeah. Rich, there was another game last week that you'd flagged up for Joona Toivio.
I didn't flag that one up. I was going to talk about Dundee United because
why not? Was that another one of you? Well, you talk about Dundee United. We'll come back to Toivio in a minute.
Yeah, it's funny going back to the sort of Finns and Scots seem to have almost a close relationship football wise. Anyway, I know Mixu, he lived here even while he was managing Finland. I say here, but the fact that he went back to Dundee United in October as manager because he was quite a popular player there in the late 80s, early 90s, and his Dundee United side, who have been one of the biggest clubs in Scotland. It's hard when you go past the big two, but they were 1 point. It's a 12-team league. They were 1 point adrift when he took over. They're now 11 points from safety. They did pick up a win at the weekend against Hearts, but I'm sure the board will be delighted that they announced record profits just today. But it sounds very difficult when the chairman has basically given him the vote of no confidence, and already 11 points away, their league splits into two with, I think, 5 games left. And, he's brought Riku Risky in, who admittedly hasn't been fully fit. He's played 3 games for a total of 84 minutes and hasn't got a goal. Now, it's not like he's just going to walk in and score a hat-trick, but it doesn't look good on Mixu. he was touting himself around Scotland quite a bit after he got sacked by Finland. He was linked to the Motherwell job before he took Dundee United, which was what Simo was linked to as well. But it's as far as his managerial reputation, coming from a pretty unsuccessful time in Finland, getting a top flight job in Scotland, and under his watch they've just gone, they'll get relegated now, and that second division in Scotland is actually very tough to get out of.
Is he still sticking with the same tactics? Has
Pretty
he brought
much.
his philosophy? Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I know we talked about quoting, so I won't use that word, but he did say, "What's the bleep point in training after they lost at Celtic?" And he said that to the club's official TV channel. So, his hybrid Finnish-Scottish accent, while I love it, it's he just doesn't bring any confidence at all, and just has that permanent sort of shrug. Oh, Tim Sparv's on my telly again. So, yeah. But, yes, so it's, as far as Scotland are concerned anyway, Mixu's very much going down with the ship, I think.
That's a shame. When Riku Risky went there, he's not gone permanent. He's not gone permanently, has he?
No, I think he's on loan till the end of the season.
That's probably for the best.
But, I mean, even that story, I know we covered it briefly in the last podcast, when the stories were coming out of Scotland. They obviously hadn't done their research, and it said, "Oh, Europa Risky." And of course it's, oh, what? What's going on? They've announced Riku. Even Larry was on Twitter saying, no, he's still here. And so maybe they've signed the wrong one, because he's scored in his first 2 games. So, he's done.
Yeah, that's true. We'll come on to that a little bit later. That's where I have a little bit more to say, as you can imagine. A little bit, anyway. What about them, Mark? I wonder if the rest of these were your suggestions, but Joona Toivio.
Joona Toivio was mine. It's he doesn't. There's not that much to talk about. When Molde went to Sevilla in the Europa League after doing really well in the group stage, and they got hammered because they haven't played for 3.5 months now. But it was a bit unfair for Joona Toivio, because it's kind of strange given that he's a centre back. But in that 3-0 defeat, he actually played quite well, and Sevilla channeled all of their attacks down the right hand side specifically to avoid dealing with him. And if you watch like the goals and the highlights now from the game, you'll see that he holds his position quite well. He beats his man quite well, and he takes control of his basic area. But it doesn't help Ole Gunnar Solskjaer or Mulder anything, because Sevilla just massively overpowered them, and they're on the way out of the Europa League pretty definitively.
If last week they were struggling because they hadn't played for 3.5 months, then 1 week later is not going to see them in a much better position, I guess, unless they're particularly strong at home.
I think not with a 3-0 deficit, not to chase. I think they're done and dusted, and it's a bit of a shame, because it's a little bit like Tim Sparv. It's a shop window. If Toivio can play well, then he can grab attention, but he's not going to turn any heads getting smashed 3-0 by Sevilla.
And so, Saber Strandval.
Yeah, it's a funny one. There was an interview with him in Ilta Sanomat at the weekend where he talked about his time in Iran. He left Vepsud last year, and he had a spell in Austria, and he seems to have landed in a club called Ra'ahan in Tehran, who are playing the bottom half in the top league of Iran. And his main tale was all about how the club, if the results aren't going too well, they sacrifice sheep in order to encourage good fortune, and the issues he has being of a Western country, trying to access social media, which is very difficult over there because he has to use the sort of software I use to watch Finnish TV, and also the fact that local women aren't allowed into the grounds, which is with our sort of perspective on things is obviously very strange. He's played 7 games out there and he scored once, but his team's at 15th out of 16 in the division, so it'll be a tough one. We've sorted out an interview for the website actually, so we'll go into that a little bit more, including how he happened to go to Iran of all the places in all the world. A Finn in Iran kind of sticks out.
There's one question that you absolutely have to ask him, which is something that I've always wondered about Sebas Strandval. Why doesn't he score more goals? He's one of those guys. He's quite athletic. He gets forward quite well. His position's quite good. He's got a good shot. He has all of the composite parts for a footballer to score goals from midfield. Not like tons and tons, but his scoring record is like, I think, he's got one this season in about 10 games. I think he scored once when he was in Austria. And before that, again, it wasn't that particularly that sort of impressive. And it's one of those things that always leaves me scratching my head because, there's lots of players like Timo Furuholm. I can't understand how he scores goals because he's just one of those guys. He's just one of those kind of classic forwards that if it goes off his backside or over his ear or whatever, but he manages to get the goal because he's in the right place at the right time. And Seba's just one of those guys. I can never understand why he just doesn't.
Maybe
one of those guys is always in the wrong place at the right time.
Yeah, something like that. I mean, that sounds like if he's in Tehran, then maybe it's the place for him. But,
yeah. And who wants to cover the next players, which is Robin Lodd and Thomas Lamb? You'll notice the listeners will notice that I'm got nothing to bring to the party in this section, so I'm quite happy to throw this open to you guys to have your say.
All I know about Robin Lodd is he's playing quite regularly for Panathinaikos, anchoring a midfield with Michael Essien, which is a very strange turn of events. I mean, albeit Essien was at his peak maybe 8, 9, 10 years ago, but it's a great education for him, and he's actually left Finland, gone to admittedly a massive club in a maybe not the most competitive league, but he's getting regular minutes, and even with the change of manager, he seems to have done quite well, and he's playing with experienced players. And he was the Veikkaus Liiga Player of the Year a couple of years ago, and fully deserved. And I think he's made a very good move there.
A few things have pleased me more because, like you said, the manager that signed him changed within 3 months of him sort of hitting the ground, and that kind of thing. Sometimes it breaks players, it breaks deals. But he knuckled down and he didn't get game time for about a month. Then he got a couple of substitute appearances. The minutes got longer and longer, and he got more stints. And he, just kept the ball, did well, kept his head down, kept playing. And I think he started now the last four games. He's done 90 minutes consecutively. And it's just it's great to see because you look at somebody like Robin Lodd and think that there's kind of hope for the Veikkaus Liiga and for Finnish players because he can go out and then even in adversity still kind of get himself up and into the team. And it's not a vintage Panathinaikos side by any stretch, but it's still, I mean, he's keeping players out of the team that are fully fledged internationals. I think the guy whose place he's taken is Mehdi Abaid, who plays for Algeria. And he's got about 30 caps for Algeria, and that's it's a big thing. It's big progress. So I'm very happy for him. And Thomas Lamb is centre back. He's playing centre back now, week in, week out in Holland. And I think they've kept 2 or 3 clean sheets in the last 5 games. And PEC's Wurle are doing well. They're kind of about 7th or 8th, aiming for a European spot for next season.
And are these players that you guys would expect to start for the Hockey next time that the games come around?
Oh, maybe not start. I mean, they'll certainly be on the list of first reserves for the 11. Lam featured at the last 2 games of the campaign, the qualifiers, and he did quite well. You know, and part of that might have been tactical because he's also eligible for Holland, and you know, why not chuck him in a competitive game and get rid of that whole argument? But Lod played, I think he's got 3 or 4 full caps, and you know, he's looking very promising. And you know, you never know how things are going to change when things with the new manager and everything. But you've got a midfield who, you know, you've got Sparv of obviously quality, but some of the other players, you know, they've suffering from injuries or they've not had, you know, the best of form or the best of moves in some cases. So, you know, if Lod keeps playing well in a team that's, you know, challenging at the top of the Greek league, then yeah, why not? I mean, him and Sparv, that's not a bad midfield.
Yeah.
Back in I don't know, episode 2 maybe. I think Mark said he would like to see the national team focus more on the informed players, and you're picking out a few there that seem to be doing the business.
Nicholas Moisander's not playing, and Serie A is a hard league. Sampdoria are having a very bad season, but he's just not playing. And Thomas Lamb is playing in the Dutch league, and he's doing a good job. So for me, that trumps experience.
The final thing we've got here about players, Finnish players overseas, are also a couple of other players that are not playing much at the moment, but maybe that's because of injury rather than form. Who has some news on Perpa Hettemai and Timo Furuholm?
So they should both be back next week or within the next 2 weeks. Timo's been out since I think about October. For about 4 or 5 months, he had a groin injury, and then he had some sort of tooth infection thing that he had to have dealt with. So he's not played since in a good few months. Perpa got injured in a Serie A game against Genoa in early January, just after the new year. He's been out for the best part of 2 months with I think just a calf strain, and he'll be back. And Roman Yarmolenko played tonight against Malaga in a friendly for the first time since his surgery, and he scored in a 4-0 win for CSKA against Malaga. So there you go. Back.
Good start.
The guys are back.
Good. Anything else from you, Rich, on the Finnish players overseas?
Well, no. I mean, I seem to have, got lucky when so many seem to have moved to England or Britain at some point. But to be honest, it's not been great news here, really. I mean, Jesse Joronen has he's come back to Finland and back to Fulham. He's fully fit again, but you know, you've got a Fulham team who aren't pulling up trees in the Championship. Glenn Kamara's moved on loan to Southend, and he's not been playing that many minutes. He started the game last week, but he wasn't in the squad yesterday. Dan O'Shaughnessy has moved from Brentford to Midtjylland, which, you know, may be a good development for him. And the various, you know, there's so many. If you look at the extent of the squad that in the Premier League, anyway, you've got all these Finns who are named, you know, in the Premier League squads. They're never going to get a game. You've got Mainpaa is the sort of reserve goalkeeper for Brighton. Vahid Hambo is coming back from injury. He says he's not quite match fit, but he's in full training anyway. You know, it's difficult. There's so many here now, but they just don't seem to get that run.
Is Jesse Joronen fit? Is he back?
He is back. He's fit. I'm not sure. I don't think he's going to be going back on loan again this season. But you know, with Fulham, you know, they don't seem to have a settled goalkeeper. You know, yes, he obviously played for part of last season before he got injured, and then went on loan. It's a shame. He's obviously got the potential, but Fulham, like a lot of clubs, only tend to loan players out, knowing that they'll always play the games. There's a clause in the contract that says if they don't play in the first team, you can't have them. So there is that sort of politicking around it as well.
Do we have any questions? There's nothing. There's not so many people watching us live today, and that's probably because it was arranged quite late. But anything, Rich, on Twitter that's come through?
Well, the only tweet I've had is from Adam, who's a Hifke fan, who says, "I would love to have listened, but all I've got is a baby girl screaming in my ear hole. You've got all this to come, Rich."
which is good. So not only is he not watching, but he's managing to heckle you at the same time.
Yeah. He's letting me know what I'm in for come next season. So, yeah.
And Yuspe on the message board there says he was just about to ask about Glenn Kamara, and you covered him briefly there.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole story there I could go into, but it's for another blog, I think.
Okay, yeah, okay. So
hang on. For another blog, is that a blog that's not this blog?
Maybe I'll actually write a story and then read it for our little side project.
Okay.
Hux asked a question about Veikkausliiga transfers, and of course we did quite a bit of this in the previous episode, but we did have this scheduled for a little bit later on. But is it something you want to talk about now?
Something since the last show, Alexei Yeremenko signed for Esiko, and I think that's the title done and dusted. because I think if you've got somebody with the pace and skill of Riski, and with the accuracy and the passing of Alexei Yeremenko, they're going to score against even the loudest biscuit packets.
Sorry.
It's all right.
That was really, really loud.
I didn't mean to shame you. I love the fact that he's still eating them. Like I know I did this. I don't care.
That's right. The dog's helping.
Yeah. But anyway, I think I've seen a couple of comment pieces in Ilta-Sanomat, Iltalehti and Urheilusanomat about Alexei Yeremenko's a big risk and he's a big gamble and all this other stuff. But dear me, he'll be able to play in the Veikkausliiga for another 4 or 5 years with the ability he's got, with his passing ability. He's not maybe he's the most committed player, but he's top. He's a top quality player. And for me, even the national side shouldn't be beyond him because he can hit. He's very good at set pieces, in that we don't have that in the national side. And in addition, he's just a very good passer of the ball. He can control the game.
Yeah, I managed to get to one of the home Liga Cup games, and I think in Asiko's first game he came on for 25 minutes, and then the next game that I went to against Kemi, he came on at half time, and just like that, you saw a change in the way that the team played, and everything you said about being able to pick a pass and see passes that other players weren't seeing in the first half is really noticeable. And I guess the pre-season will just see him playing longer and longer and longer until hopefully, every game, doing that from the very beginning. It's also during that game there were two trial players, which was Mate Radatsky and El Hadji Kane. Now, Kane, Radatsky had his name on the back of his shirt, so maybe there was a clue there that
he signed.
Yeah, that things have progressed a little bit. And this was a couple of weeks ago, but Kane hadn't signed at that time, and he since has. And he's Senegalese born but raised in Spain, so has the EU passport. And bearing in mind that Asiko had lost a lot of defenders, then they signed some, and then one of them left again. I think people were a little bit worried that there was a little bit unbalanced at the back, and there were lots of players who could play at the back in centre back that aren't necessarily central defenders. So seeing him play, and the lazy comparison is that with Gogoa, who'd just been sold, that he's perhaps bigger, strong, and came out with the ball, playing with the ball at his feet. And I think it took about 20 minutes for him to win over the fans. And I think everyone's pleased to see that he's going to be there next year. And I think he'll be a real asset and will hopefully keep that defence tight. And also what was noticeable for me, seeing him up close for the first time, was Herme, who just looked class. Even with the Alice band, he still looked class with the ball at his feet and reading of the game. So yeah, it bodes well.
Yeah, I like Jarkko Hurme, and I like a lot of the signings that SJK have signed. I have to kind of cut it short a little bit, because I mean it's very difficult, because there's a lot of good news coming out of Seinäjoki, but it does sometimes feel a little bit like an SJK love-in.
Well, it's the only football I really get to watch over here, so it's something I can bring to the party.
Yeah, but it's not the only football in Finland. I mean, it's quite noticeable though that at SJK, all of the big sort of stories, with the exception of Tapio Heikkilä, is signings coming in, like guys that have come in and sort of made a difference. I suppose actually Pelvas going to Sweden was a decent story, but for HJK, the majority of the news is that they didn't sign somebody, missed out on someone, or they've let someone go. So Zanelli's gone now to Afghanistan in a club that I'm not going to try to pronounce. But they've lost it again in a similar way that they did last year. They've lost a huge amount of players, and they're not really sort of bringing in a lot of reinforcements.
It seems like they're scouting by YouTube again. That new Colombian chap, well, apparently he's done quite well and he scored a couple of goals. It's one of these that seem to be, they think, all right, they look good and they bring a lot of people in on trials. Some work, some don't, and you just sort of wonder where the strategy is. I do wonder that, that whoever they've got doing their transfer dealings, whether it's Aki when he goes to Tokyo or something else, it just seems like there's no structure to it. And, for a club that, will say they're the biggest in Finland, which, yeah, they are, but they just seem to have such a scattergun approach where, you need to sort of build on a solid core of players, but it's just not happening.
Yeah, I mean, it's the impression I get is that they're a little bit kind of trying a little bit to be too clever. You know what I mean? For their own good. Like somehow they'll stand back and, we'll see in a big reveal in, by May or June that they had a great squad of youth players all along. But yeah. I just think, I mean, if you look at SJK and the way they set up, I can see how they're going to score goals. I look at, for example, PK35 from Vanta, PK35, Kolkutviis from Vanta, and I can see how they're going to score goals. I can see that they've got a lot of threatening players and a lot of threatening positions. And I look at HJK and I think, there's not a great deal of threat. There's not a great deal of danger. They're probably going to be very tight and good, solid defensively, as they pretty much always are. But they don't have a great deal of danger in attack. They don't have a target man or a striker that you think this guy's going to get 20 goals, because I look at somebody like Roope Riski and I think he's not going to be in the Veikkausliiga by the end of the season. I think he's going to score about 10 goals before September. And I reckon with Yarmolenko, they'll probably get to the sort of second, third qualifying round in Europe. And if they do, and if Roope takes his chance, he'll be gone. He'll go somewhere. He'll get himself back on the road in Europe. But for HJK, I just can't see, where the goals are going to come from. And
maybe that comment answers the question that Huck tried to get over onto the question panel on the left-hand side, but he typed it wrongly. He said, what position should HJK focus on? So you think it's probably someone to bring those goals?
Yeah.
The contributions as much as anything else. While they've lost goals up front, they've lost so much in midfield in the last sort of 18 months or so. It just seems this Morelos, he's scoring goals and he's looked good, but who's actually going to give him? You sort of see now where Lorda's gone and they've lost Zanelli and Savage. Just he's gone as well, and just everything about it. It just seems like they're okay. They probably will score goals if they have the chances, but other than Tanaka, even last season he did okay in some games and not in others, but he's not necessarily the key.
It's each to their own, but I've never rated Tanaka. I don't know why. He's just one of those guys. I just don't like. It's not that I don't like. I was going to say I don't like the look of him, but that's too strong. I don't think he has enough end product. You know what I mean? He's not a hang your hat on kind of player. And you look out, Moshtag Yagubi hasn't signed for anybody yet. He's still.
Is he not signed for that Kazakh team as well?
No, he was out
the weekend.
Is he done?
Yeah, him and Zanelli have signed for the same club in Kazakhstan.
No.
Yeah, it was on Saturday or Sunday.
Is this could be? It could be.
Well,
I'm gonna have to check.
It'd be one of those when they've signed, but when the agent says, "But we're still looking at Turkey," so.
Yeah, because I've seen all the confirmation about Zanelli, and I've seen it because he had offers apparently from the MLS, but I haven't seen anything on Mossa actually out in the news confirmed. Yeah. Because I did see that he was rumored to be interesting SE Core.
Yeah, there were negotiations, but pretty sure he's signed for this club, but it seems very loosely. He's still got he's picked up a girl at the club, but he's still hoping for that long-term crush.
Yeah.
So there's some transfer stories, and
we've sort of slipped in.
Yeah. So let's carry on with Liga Cup. I think I did my bit about Asyikor, so let's not overplay that for fear of upsetting everyone else. Fans of every other mostly Mark, yeah. But I think we've kind of also covered sort of what's been going on at Hoyikor. I've been hearing a lot of talk recently about Perke 35 Vanta and their sexy kit. So, do you want to talk about their football, or do you want to talk about their new shirt, Rich?
Well, my shirt is in the post, so that's why I'm not wearing it. But they seem to have carried on in the vein that they did last year with their sort of Kosovan, Albanian, and Spanish sort of influx. They sort of have their bigger 5 amigos. I think they have. They still got Pablo Cunago. Looking sharp. It's you do sort of think. I haven't seen enough of them and the Liga Cup, you just will not ever put any sort of credence on form in the Liga Cup. But, they look like they can mix it a little bit, and they do look like they could implode like their manager at some point and go completely postal. But, they look like, there's more about them, say, than when KTP came up, or last year Yaro just sort of flattered to deceive for a lot of the year, and then PK35 looked like they've got a little bit more about them. Some of the players they've picked up from other Veikkaus Liga clubs, and most of that squad played in Ukkonen last year, so they haven't made massive changes. And with Shefki Kuchi, who knows? Last year he was quite mellow, but even in the pre-season this year, he's already shown the odd flash of the Shefki that we know and love from his year at Honka.
Look, he's not the first. I think the difference between Shefki and most other managers is just that the microphones are closer in the Veikkaus Liga, and the majority of other managers are a bit more used to the Veikkaus Liga environment. I mean, he's going to scream and shout. That's what Shefki does. but it motivates his players, and you can't deny that he's a good manager because
box office.
It's not just box office. He kept Honker up when they didn't have a pot to pee in because they had no money. They were going through financial troubles. Everything was kind of going to the wall, and he kept them up. And he kept them up by about 6 points, something like that. Not a great deal, but that wasn't an easy job by anybody's imagination. Then he moved to Vanta, and Vanta weren't exactly going anywhere until Shefki turned up. They weren't ripping up trees in Ykkönen. They were mid-table, I think, relegation fodder for the season before, and then he came up and he made them promotion candidates, and he got them up. And I look at somebody like Niaji Kuchi, experienced striker. I reckon there's 10, 12 goals in the Veikkausliiga next year. He scored, I think, once or twice already in the Liga Cup. It'll be penalties, it'll be headers, it'll be scruffy goals. He's that kind of brawler in the box. But he'll get the goals that, for example, Jaro couldn't get last year. He'll get the goals to keep him in the league. They're not just a sexy shirt.
And how do we feel about the final? I think I will say one thing, that it was noticeable that Asukor won Group A after just 4 games. I think the 5th game is still to be played, if I'm correct.
It's on
they play Rups.
Yeah. So of note from that is that in 4 games they've only conceded 1 goal. I think they've only scored 4 or 5 in that as well. So there's work to be done on, and I won a couple of those games in the last minutes as well. So it's a bit closer than perhaps that might suggest. And yeah, we don't want to read too much into the Liga Cup, as you said, Rich, but it's a good start to the season anyway, as a warm up go. What about Lahti, Mark? Anything you can give us from what they've been up to?
I think when I look at the final and I look at the way that they got there, I like Lahti. I just can't look that far past Asiko, because they've got Rahimi scoring goals, Reperiski scoring goals. They have Yeremenko. They've got just a ton of quality throughout the side. So I like Lahti, but I can't see them getting anything against Esiko.
And apparently the final's being played here in Seinäjoki as well, which is quite handy. So I'll be able to get down for that. And
at the newly nominated, what's it called now?
Amps? No, not the new stadium. The Oma Aspe.
Omasp.
Yeah, exactly. Oma Stadion on Maiden Koti.
Yes.
That was me. That was my own skills.
That was awesome.
I'm going to give myself some love. Can I do that?
No, I'll give you some love for
that. But yeah, maybe when we go down for the Liga Cup final, it's indoors, of course. So maybe I'll crack open the old Periscope and let everyone have a look and see what it's all about. So keep your eyes peeled.
Yeah, that's the joys of doing well in the group stage. You get home advantage.
Is that how it works? Is it? I did wonder.
In previous years, it's normally the team with the best group stage record can either host the game or elect where to play it. So it's certainly a bit of a perk, I suppose. Asiko to Lahti isn't the biggest of trips, but Rops were playing Hoyiko last year, and that sort of all went a little bit odd, didn't it? Because it was a Easter Saturday, I think it was, and there were some transport issues. But it's it's good, and obviously both teams have won the Liga Cup in the last couple of years. So that should be quite interesting.
And Huck's quite right. That means that the game won't be played behind closed doors. Goes back to what we were talking about in the last game, and also the subject of a couple of recent blog posts. So, which I'll come on to those again in a few minutes' time. Juspe has asked a question. Any thoughts on Kemi?
Yep, I think PS Kemi they will be the proof in the pudding of why you shouldn't put too much faith in the Liga Cup, because I reckon they're going back down in the Veikkausliiga season. I think they've done very well in the Liga Cup. I think they've got a lot of good young players, but I think when a team comes up like PS Kemi, they generally have a very good start to the season that's full of energy and aggression. Kemi's it's a hell of a long way to go for a lot of the southern teams, so they'll do quite well at home. But I don't think they've got the quality to stay up.
They were decent. The game I saw, they did play well. It was surprisingly decent in that sense. And as I say, that was almost the last kick of the game in the 92nd minute to nick it 1-0. So
I think the difference with promoted teams is that these lads will have been, from the second that last season finished, they'll have gone out on the jolly, and then they'll have been training every day for every day for the winter, so that they're ready for the Veikkausliiga season. Whereas when every other team and every other player gets to the Liga Cup, they're pretty much using that as their preseason to get themselves ready. It's just my personal opinion, but I think Kemi and Ilves are going to be in trouble this year. They are a good team. They do play some good football. I'm
sorry, but going back to kits, it's Kemi last year had one of my favourite football shirts I've seen in a very long time. Half and half, red and blue, but with white sleeves.
Yeah.
And this year I don't know what's happened. They've gone to a Stano plain white jersey with a sponsored Disturb on it, and I couldn't believe it. I mean, admittedly, I'm a bit of a Johnny-come-lately to, Kemi's traditional kit designs, but to see that, it was just broke my heart. And plus, the club wanted €80 for one of their shirts last year, so it was a bit much.
€80?
Yeah, apparently they were custom made by Adidas and had to be ordered bespoke. I said I'll let you know. I'm just browsing, but I didn't complete the purchase.
On the bench on match day for that price.
Yeah.
For that price, I'd expect a squad number in at least 2 games.
Yeah.
You know that, yeah. Okay, I think that we've pretty much come, not quite in order, but we've come to the end of our agenda. Mark is still getting far too much love and attention.
I would suggest a worrying amount of love.
Yeah, and actually it's all coming from, let's out him as well, it's coming from @Flaren as well. He seems to be quite enamoured. It must be your melodious Geordie tones that are doing it for him. So let's start to wrap it up there. Thanks to everyone that's come and watched us live, that's asked questions, made comments. The format of this show really works when we have stuff coming on the screen, when we have questions, when we have tweets, and we can kind of bounce off that as well. So thanks everyone that's here live, and those that aren't listening live, but listen to the podcast. Thanks for downloading that, and see if you can join us next time for the Finnish Football Show number 5. Just to remind you of where you can find me, Mark, and Rich outside of the recorded show. So Mark's on fcsuomi.com. Mark, what's the most recent thing that's gone on your page recently?
Last weekend, when I did the roundup, I think there was 10, 11 players that all sat out on the bench. I did the most recent one was the roundup from the weekend, and it was a pretty disappointing one because there was a lot of good performances on the guys that actually got game time, but Mika Ojala, Jopo Himpalo, Nicholas Moisander, the whole host of Finnish national team players just aren't getting the games. They're sitting on the bench every week, and it's quite frustrating.
And thanks, Mark. And Rich is on escapetosuomi.com. And Rich, I think you just had something published in the last day or two from one of our friends here on the message board.
Yeah, Huck did a very welcome, very very good interview with Kaisa Collin, who's a Finland under-19s international for the girls team, who also plays for Hoiko. She's very. I hadn't actually spoken to her before. In the interview, she came across as a very confident young girl, which, from my experience of being married to a Finnish woman, it's pretty much the norm. But it's it was a good interview, and Huck's done a couple of pieces for ETS recently, and it's really really enjoyed it, and it's always nice to have some people doing my work for me. So.
Yeah, keep up the good work, Huck. I'm on Explore Finland podcast.com. I've just pretty much come to the end of season 2. The final episode went out last weekend, and it was me doing the old avanto uinti, which is ice swimming. So I went to the sauna and then in through the hole in the frozen lake, and it was amazing. And it sounds ridiculous, but it was like this chemical rush, and I'm going back again. So I'm kind of hooked.
I've got that saved for my morning to work tomorrow.
Yeah, well, there you go.
I've got it all queued up. Can't see that. It's all queued up on my phone.
Oh, bless you. You did that just so that I would give you some love, didn't you? I will do it because I'm cheap. And also at the end of the last podcast, I mentioned having ideas for some additional content from the Finnish football show. We have got something. A couple of other people outside of us have recorded some blog articles that they've written, and I've put them together in a shorter podcast, which will come out in between this and the next Finnish football show. We're going to call it Finnish Football Shorts, which was Mark's name for that additional show, and I liked it, or eventually I liked it once I got it. Keep your eyes open. It'll come in the same feed. It'll all be part of the Finnish football show, but there'll be these 2 slightly different formats. And if any of you guys listening want to contribute to that, then you can reach me on Twitter at Explore Finland, and I can give you my email address where you can send the things through to. So very happy to accept submissions from anyone, and if they sound good and they're interesting subject about Finnish football, then we'll include it on there, and it just allows us to put a bit more out without us doing too much more work, which is always good.
I have to give one big up to the boys on the border, TP47.
And that's because somebody just told you have.
That's the Floran who's been giving me all the love for the last hour.
So he just bought a shout out.
Is
basically
2,000 the limit?
I don't know. I don't know what you get for 2,000. I'll have to start a pricing strategy.
No.
Okay, guys, we're going to hang around at the end of the recording for a little bit of off the record. Those that are watching are welcome to join us, and those that are listening on the podcast, your fun's going to end when this piece of music ends.